Thanks for tuning in to the HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda. The HR Uprising is focused on helping forward-thinking people professionals deliver real lasting value in their organisations. I'm a chartered psychologist, speaker and trainer, and recently authored the best-selling business book, How to Be a Change Superhero. My day job is founder and CEO of software and training business Actus. This gives me the opportunity to work with other businesses like yours. We are focused on building a better workplace for people wherever they are located, with the help of our performance, learning and talent management software and our training and consultancy services. Every week on the podcast, I will be covering different topics and challenges, joined by relevant experts and real-life people professionals. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy and get value from this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's HR Uprising podcast. And we're continuing with our high performance HR series. So 2 weeks ago, we talked about organisational development strategy. Before that, we talked about balanced scorecards. We're now going to move through to really that key topic for so many organisations in terms of driving high performance. And it's about leadership and management. And of course, we're going to look at that from the angle of what we as HR professionals can do to ensure that we have strong, positive leadership and management behaviours, which in turn drives a strong and effective culture. So we'll drill into that, and I'm going to run through this in about 5 points that I want to go through in terms of this, that will explain, first of all, the difference between leadership and management. They're not exactly the same, so we'll define it. We'll talk about how leaders and managers contribute to a high performance culture. Then thinking about what we can do as HR professionals to influence this, to embed it. Tools, training and strategies that can help develop leaders and managers within our organisations, and also a leadership pipeline, how you can develop a leadership pipeline. We won't so much go into succession planning because we'll cover talent and succession in one of our later episodes, but thinking about how people move from individual contributor through an organisation. And we talk about that as the leadership pipeline, which is quite relevant for us to understand when we think where things go wrong. So starting, of course, at the beginning, what is the difference between leadership and management? And I think it is an interesting term here. Sometimes people use them interchangeably, and that's okay. But realistically, there is a difference in terms of those. And actually, a manager can manage and lead, and a leader can manage and lead, but they are different roles, and it's potentially sometimes it's seen as a seniority piece as to where management behaviours switch into leadership behaviours and vice versa. But fundamentally, management really is about planning, organising and coordinating. It's about keeping the wheels turning, ensuring that day-to-day activities run smoothly. Leadership, on the other hand, is more about setting direction. It's about inspiring and motivating people towards a vision. Often it's things like change would fit into leadership. So looking forwards and being transformational. So as I say, people can do both. And actually we might need people to do both, but they are different activities. And maybe the emphasis would vary depending on the role that somebody's in. Traditionally, someone who, let's say, is a team leader is going to be more focused on people management. And as people become more senior in an organisation, they maybe become more about leadership. So the emphasis might flip. And in short, managers make sure we do things right. Leaders make sure we do the right things. Now, I think that's a Cotter quote, but we want to make sure that people have not either or, it's a continuum. And what you want in your organisation to have those people who are developing both of those capabilities. I remember I once saw someone talk about this and they said, is it better to be under-led and over-managed or over-led and under-managed? And I think people often think that it's better to be over-led, But the reality in a business is leadership is good, but if you had too much leadership going transformation and change and not enough day-to-day management, then actually that could be dangerous for a business. So it is about, yes, we value leadership behaviours, but management behaviours, they're what keep the lights on. They are really important. If you think about things like performance management, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks, those are the things that drive engagement, drive high performance, full stop. So inspiring is great, but if we don't get people to actually carry out the day-to-day behaviours to deliver results, then we're not actually going to achieve what we're here to start with. So both are important. And, good leadership's not nice to have. It's essential, because leaders and managers both contribute to a high performance culture. If we think about behaviours, one of the first things is actually setting the tone. So this doesn't matter it doesn't matter whether we're talking about people as leaders or managers. Ultimately, you want people who are going to role model the right behaviours. And senior managers or leaders of an organisation, the tone really does. People talk about the leadership shadow. The tone, the way in which they behave, the way in which they demonstrate that they value people or people management activities, really will have an impact through the whole organisation. So they need to be self-aware in terms of actions speak louder than words. The other thing to remember is that employee engagement, if you think about leadership and management and high performance, the impact on things, well, you've only got to think about your Gallup Q12 engagement survey. So those 12 questions, when you break them down, about 70% of them, let's say about 8 of those questions really relate to people management activities. So it really does show that managers account, it said that managers account for up to 70% of the variance in employee engagement scores, which is pretty big. So our managers make all the difference for engagement. Employee engagement is what gets high performance. It's about employee retention. We know all of those things. So if you want more engaged people in your organisation, look at the behaviours of your managers and leaders. Thinking about other aspects of a positive culture, you've probably come across psychological safety. Now, this is something that we want for people to feel safe, for people to speak up, to be able to be creative, to be innovative. They want to feel that they're not going to be called out if they make mistakes. So you want to have an environment which has psychological safety. Well, again, that is entirely driven by the behaviours of your line manager. If a line manager is open to people, suggesting things, trying things out, then that is going to encourage that psychological safety. Whereas if you've got a manager who's very critical or blaming, then that's going to have the opposite. So it's really key for us to think about high performance. If we want to have a high performance culture in our organisation, then we have to start with the behaviours of our leaders and managers. And it's not just the day-to-day behaviours, it's almost the things that they don't say as well in terms of those. So what can you do to create a positive leadership or management culture as an HR professional within your organisation? Well, we do have a huge role to play in terms of shaping leadership and management culture. The sort of things that we can do proactively to influence it positively would be start by defining what are the expectations around leadership and management. So what does good leadership or good management look like? Behavioural frameworks can be really helpful on this. And something that I do quite often when I work with organisations is I would work with a group of managers or leaders to define almost a management charter. And what do I mean by management charter? It's basically about them agreeing what are the behaviours, the day-to-day behaviours that employees could expect from their line managers. So should they expect to have regular feedback or monthly one-to-ones, praise, those sort of things. So from that exercise, it's really helpful for a group of people. It needs to come from within, and you could facilitate that with a group of your managers. Get them to say, what does good management look like in our organisation? And let's come up with the top 10 behaviours or activities or expectations that you would see. It's a bit like a job description for a manager. And you can go a step further with this, which I've done with quite a few businesses, particularly when they're trying to embed better people management behaviours, is you can actually, if you have something like a management charter, you could set a performance objective against line managers for them to carry out the activities of a line management charter. So it might be having regular one-to-ones or carrying out appraisals or development plans at appropriate times. What you're doing by creating a people management objective is that you are making it appear to be important, because it is important. But very often people can see management behaviours, particularly people management behaviours, as a bit of an add-on to a job, or maybe even an inconvenience that's getting in the way of their day job. So if you imagine someone's got 4 objectives, none of them are to do with people management, but they've got a team of 6, well, actually that doesn't make sense. A lot of what they're achieving should be through other people. So giving them an objective which points out the importance of people management kind of gives it a credibility. And it's the same thing with that, the charter. It emphasises it places importance on these behaviours that can sometimes be overlooked, and they are the most important behaviours because they do drive employee engagement and employee performance. So start with clear expectations. What else can you do? Well, be a role model. Think about how you behave within an organisation. You develop those behaviours, demonstrate those behaviours. If you've got a team, make sure that they've got objectives, that you are modelling appropriate people management behaviours so that others can see it. Then could you put in something where you are recognising and rewarding the right behaviours, noticing those people who really are developing strong cultures, maybe they're developing their people, really recognise that we all know there's some managers who are so people focused and do such a good job. Make sure that they're recognised, make sure that they're maybe acting as mentors to others and can develop those behaviours in other people. If you see negative behaviours or people with negative behaviours, think about how you can call them out or put in place some development. And I'll talk about options for developing people. If you're spotting those sort of behaviours, find a way of trying to iron them out, challenge them. Don't just let them sit unchallenged. So be brave, be courageous if you want to you want to address those sort of things. And really try to create a safe opportunity for people to develop their leadership and management behaviours, right? Give them development, because not everybody knows how to do it instantly. And actually, particularly in smaller businesses, quite often people haven't had the training that they might be lucky to get if they're in a larger organisation. So people are sort of making it up as they go along. And if you're making it up as you go along, you really are only going to be able to draw on your experiences. So if they haven't had great people management role models, they're not going to be a great people manager. So think about how you can get people talking about what good looks like, get people to be self-aware, make it safe for people to develop their people management skills, is what I was saying. It's really about showing that we value leadership and management. And I think that goes full circle back to if you want to value it, then make sure that people management behaviours are role modelled from the highest level, and you place an importance on it by saying things like one-to-ones are valued, need to happen on frequency. And if you've got systems and software, target the uses of it. So people who use our software, Actus, let's say, set out clear expectations about frequency of utilising the tool, or when appraisals should happen, or when people should have development. Set those expectations and use the management information, the reporting that's available to you, to follow up if people are not delivering against them. So there are consequences, and you will help get greater rigour within your people management activities. So we've talked about creating a positive culture, we've talked about what leadership and management is, and we've talked about how important it is when it links with performance. What can you do if you want to develop the people management or leadership and management culture within your organisation? Well, they're fairly obvious things, but let's think about leadership training or management training. So you could define some appropriate training for each level of leader within your organisation. Now, if you're an SME, maybe you can join with other SMEs and go and reach out to something slightly outside where you could actually, they could meet with other line managers. If you've got a sufficient volume within your organisation, then certainly one of the most important ones for me is making sure that everybody knows how to do essential people management. So it's really the fundamentals of goal setting, of giving feedback, of people being able to be constructive with open questions to use, coaching skills. So just essential people management behaviours that often people haven't been taught. And as I said before, maybe they've not been modelled. If you want, I'll put a link in the show notes to, I've got an ebook where you can actually, it's called the Perform Model. It's an ebook which just runs through the different leadership and management behaviours. So what good looks like. If you go back a few years, actually, on the HR Uprising podcast, I did a people management series. So there are 8 standalone episodes which go through the 8 different areas of people management. So we've got lots of resources if you wanted to formalise this with your people. And also we've got aligned training. So do get in touch if anything like that would be of use. So offer people training. It's really important that people get that training, that skills. And once they've got the people management, if you're a larger organisation or as people go through their careers, there's other skills that they need to pick up. So it may be about being more commercially aware or more strategic. So there are other skills that are appropriate as people become more senior in an organisation. So great if you can actually make sure people have that training or learning as they go through. And coaching and mentoring, if you can invest in that, or if you're in a position to support internally with maybe you've got a coaching qualification, one-to-one development is really, really powerful. And I see it works particularly well at both ends, either brand new managers, so someone who's going into their first leadership role, really, there's lots to learn. There's lots of different challenges, particularly if they've gone from being a part of a team to managing the people they used to work with. That's quite tricky. So giving them some one-to-one coaching or mentoring is going to help them bridge that gap and pick up those initial skills when they're perhaps feeling a little bit out of their depth. At the other end, I think coaching is particularly helpful for senior leaders who are trying to be more strategic, who need a bit more headspace, maybe for them to be less tactical, to be able to focus on those strategic elements. So being prepared to invest in some coaching and mentoring is helpful. You could have internal mentors if you're lucky enough to have that, otherwise going external to get an external coach. 360-degree feedback. I think this is a really powerful tool for people in leadership roles for self-awareness. And we talked earlier about calling out negative behaviours. Sometimes that's quite hard to do. But if you had 360-degree feedback, and so you've got some standard questions for different roles. And again, if you want to get in touch with us, we do 360-degree feedback. We've got team leader level. We've got a whole directory of questionnaires that are appropriate to different roles. And the beauty of something like 360-degree feedback is people get that overall view of what they do well and maybe what they can improve. So that can be a great way to hold a mirror up to somebody who perhaps needs to adjust their leadership behaviours. So consider 360-degree feedback. Now, I wouldn't say just pick out one person who needs it, not if you're trying to fix them. It needs to be done as more of a holistic exercise. You could do it with one person if they are someone who just wants some very specific development if they requested it. But I wouldn't use 360-degree feedback to be a remedial fix somebody. I think you've got to have open, honest conversations. But it is a really powerful tool as long as you support it with a professional debrief. So even if you can't stretch to a coaching program for people, if you did 360-degree feedback, I would recommend that you do invest in professional feedback so that people take the right information away from it. Other options where, again, when budgets are tight, things like peer learning. So can people learn from each other, coach each other, new managers, groups of people? Can you create forums or cohorts where people can share their experiences and learn from each other? Just having a conversation is really valuable. And if people are virtual, which many people are now, maybe you can set it up as a virtual coffee room, because people are not necessarily having the opportunity to have an informal chat with somebody. So that could be really helpful. And remember, curate materials. There's so much content out there, but then people don't always find time to find it. So could you use your learning management platform if you've got one, or just a forum, an area where you've got various just-in-time resources. So it could be bite-sized training modules, it could be little bits of micro-learning, LinkedIn learning, lots of things there. And I think overall, trying to encourage people that learning should be ongoing. Leadership's a journey, so we need to evolve with it. And sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's difficult, because people are people. So there's always challenges that come along. So encouraging people to do ongoing development is a really good idea, because it's not just done once you've gone through a training course that you are trained. It's about picking up and developing throughout. Not everybody gets everything perfect from the start, and doesn't get things perfect all the time. So helping people to feel safe to continue to learn. And then finally, a point that we'll probably come back to a bit in terms of succession planning, but think about creating what you call a leadership pipeline. So there is a great book, it must be about 25 years old, called The Leadership Pipeline. And what that talks about is there are different steps as you go through an organisation, and they require us to not only take on new skills, but also to let go of old skills. So I would say, let's say leadership, as you go, one of the biggest changes is going from being an individual contributor to being a team leader. And that really does require people to learn how to let go, to let other people do things that they did themselves. Now, I think this is even harder when you have people who are almost player managers, when they've only got one or two direct reports, because there's almost a grey area as to what's my job, or is the management, how important is the management when you've only got quite a small team? So those people need a bit of support and development. And they need to recognise that, yes, some things they do themselves, but how do they help others to deliver and achieve? As you go up the leadership pipeline, this book talks about, as you move them from team leader to, let's say, equivalent of a cost centre manager, the next level up, so you're a manager of managers, well, then you need to let go of some of the more people-oriented work. Obviously, you need to do some of it for your direct reports, but you need to think more broadly and look more around the organisation. And then as you get to the top of the organisation, they talk about being more strategic, being able to look outside of the organisation. And one of the things that always sticks in my mind is they talk about, if you've got somebody, let's say a strategic level person, who starts acting down and doing a sort of team leader type role, so slightly micromanaging, what that does is it creates a sort of blockage in the leadership pipeline. Everyone gets a bit confused about what their role is, and it's actually, although the intention might be positive, it's actually not very effective. So think about that leadership pipeline. Consider putting training in place. So I did this when I was at Siemens, and we put in different training courses for each level of that leadership pipeline. One of the other things is I would also talk about, look for the people gene in people that are being recruited into people management. That old adage, the best salesperson is rarely the best sales manager. That's true. Or engineers, the best engineering manager. If you can find ways that people can develop without having to go down the people management route, not everybody, in my opinion, has a people gene. And if you don't have that people gene, and what I mean by that is just that inclination to get the best out of others, if they're only going for a management role to get a promotion or to earn more money, they're not necessarily going to be great people managers. So try and steer those people who really are never going to give a damn about people into seniority in other routes, and look beyond this sort of technical brilliance. Look for people who have got emotional intelligence, they're collaborative, they're good communicators, because they're going to be more effective in terms of developing people. Thinking about other things, if you want people who are, I suppose, just test out leadership, could you create stepping stones? people stepping up to be a team lead for a period of time, or taking responsibility of a project, being a buddy or mentors. That's a great way to give people management experience, sort of leadership experience, without having to step into the job fully. So you can see that, get them to test it out for size. Make sure people are getting stretch opportunities. So maybe give them opportunity to lead cross-functional projects, drive change initiatives, or manage bigger teams, so that people are then developing all the time and they're feeling stretched within their roles. So that may then allow them to grow from their first management role into more of a leadership role. Think about competencies. You might want to map out the right behaviours or management competencies, so it's really clear what the behaviours are and what the skills that people need to develop to be an effective leader. And of course, those competencies or behaviours, or those type of questions, would be the sort of things that sit within your 360-degree feedback. There'd be similar questions, like, for example, communication skills, or delivering clarity, setting clear objectives, providing feedback. So these are skills and competencies which would be helpful, and make sure you've got development that will allow people to work on these skills if needed. So they're not things that you're born with necessarily. Some people are naturally good at them, but help them to develop those skills with materials, etc. It doesn't have to be formal training. There's lots of content out there that you can access. And I think make sure that leadership development is something that goes on. Everyone can be a leader. So encouraging people, whether they are in charge of others or not, to basically develop them and talk about leadership. And just normally do people have that ambition to become leaders? But saying that, if people don't force them to when they don't want to, because if you can keep someone in an organisation who is a highly motivated individual contributor, that's great as well. So it's really about making sure that your pipeline, you're developing people who are ready for it, but also choose the people who have the sort of innate motivation, who want to be good at it, and find a way of keeping people in the organisation who are great individual contributors, but not necessarily going to be happy people managers, because then they're therefore not going to make their people they manage happy. So don't force square pegs into round holes. So that's kind of a summary as to the sort of things. I hope there's a few points that you can use as food to thought. We looked at the difference between leadership and management. We've talked about how leadership and management behaviours drive high performance. Hopefully thought about how we in HR can create a positive leadership culture. We've talked about training, tools and strategies for developing it. And also we've touched on leadership pipeline. So hopefully it's given you some ideas and inspiration to take back to your organisations. As ever, I'd love to hear from you. Do get in touch if you want to hear anything else from us, or get in touch with me on LinkedIn, etc. And do pass this on to somebody if you think that they'd find it of use. Remember, we've got loads and loads of resources that you can take advantage of. So you can either go to hruprising.com, this podcast episode page, and download some of them, or just go to our Actus website and search through the resources. Thanks for tuning in. Speak to you soon. I really hope you found this week's episode useful and enjoyable. If you did, perhaps you could recommend us to a friend or colleague, or give us a review on your platform of choice. It really helps new listeners to find us. Now, you can access links to any of the information mentioned in this show via the website www.hruprising.com. Further free resources are also available at www.actus.co.uk. There you can also find out more about our software and training solutions. Finally, why not join our LinkedIn group, the HR Uprising, to share ideas and collaborate with other like-minded people professionals. Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast.